MJL for 3778.
Down a long tunnel. Then we seemed to go through a place like we had to squeeze through.
Hans and I are running down a long tunnel.
How we're walking along a road. Nothing much is happening, just walking along.
Offering my greetings.
He smiles and says to say hello to you.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Asking him about this other guide that you mentioned. I don't remember the name, but he knows anyway. And
his name is Miranon. Miranon.
Miranon.
Yes.
He says we have a brotherhood. They take different forms.
Ask him if the brotherhood has a name.
The order of, it seems to be Zo, like Z-O or Z-O-E. I'm kind of rejecting it because it doesn't make any. That's what he's saying.
That's fine.
I tried to get Zodiac out of it, but I don't think that's right.
Take it just as it is. Ask him if it is composed entirely of humans.
He says no. They have people who have been human before, and some who've been in the category of what we call angels. Entities who have not lived on the earth plane.
Yes, that's what I meant. Good.
But their goal is all the same. To get closer to the oneness as he described to me a few days ago.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
With the awareness that those entities in human form have to be brought closer to that oneness. So that all of the other levels can move upward.
Ask him if it is possible for you to meet other members of that brotherhood.
He said he's not. He says it's possible, but it's like everyone has work to do, and well, he says I do meet them in my sleep. I leave, and I work on an inner plane. So I work with some of them, but I haven't been able to bring back that memory.
Ask him then how he would properly define the process we call sleep in, say, the average human being.
It has many properties. for the sake of the physical body, it's necessary for the processes to slow down. But he says it's also necessary to be recharged. And there's a process of recharging that goes on during sleep.
How does that process work?
I'm trying to get that.
Good.
It seems that what I'm getting is that everyone leaves their body. A certain amount, maybe just per second. Everyone doesn't have the work on the inner planes to do. But the recharging is connected with the astral body that leaves. And it's like the environment Okay, the astral plane has a different kind of energy. Because it's a first step toward the higher planes. And just experiencing that energy while outside of the physical body creates a certain vibration that has a charging effect. And people who develop to a higher level move to a higher plane and are able to bring back more of that energy. And with each level, there is a different vibration.
Does this departure from the physical, even 1 second, does that affect some recharging then?
Yes.
Very good. Can he relate that process of separation to any part of the way we know sleep in the stages of it, where, for example, what we call delta sleep, which is a very comatose sleep, is this the point where this takes place, or when?
It's the REM sleep. Usually in the very early beginning of moving into REM, the dream, rapid eye movement.
That's where it takes place then.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the recharging takes place.
Yes.
Very good. Mm-hmm.
He says it doesn't continue during the whole time that the human is in REM sleep. It's just momentary for some. In more highly evolved individuals leave during that whole period of time.
What then? How does he? Is the process of dreaming as we understand it, or is it something different?
Well, the process of dreaming is as we understand it in terms of the different uses of dreams. It's a kind of a clearinghouse for the day's activities or the week's activities, as a release of emotions. But what is not generally understood, although it's beginning to be more understood, is the actual process of leaving the body. He's telling me that my own personal observations have been accurate in terms of perceiving a different quality in a dream that indicates an out-of-body experience as opposed to activation of a memory or a precognitive flash, which is another thing. He says it's the same thing as activation of a memory because it's a memory forward instead of backward. And it doesn't matter. In his terms, it's all the same. There's a quality about an out-of-body experience that can be remembered that is qualitatively different from other aspects of dreaming. Sometimes it's very much more vivid. It usually is more the experience is more deeply felt. It's not as many dreams are like one is watching a picture. It's very bright and being very much a part of it. He says again, this is something that is often hard to verbalize, but that my own intuitive observations have been absolutely accurate.
Very good. Mm-hmm. He mentioned that the precognitive dream taking place, or that it is the same as a forward memory.
Mm-hmm.
In the question of having such pre-memory, as it were, how then can we possibly, is it possible to set up stages of pre-memory like that?
Well, he says that's just a matter of the continued process of developing. That as we develop our consciousness to a wider level of awareness, we can actually move into, as I am now, very easily into a space of no time. And so that if we focus and we practice to focus on some specific event, then that we'll be able to be aware of that. But he reminds me that there is so much going on at once that the human mind is protected because of the frailties without the proper development to tune into everything that's happening at once. It would be a shattering experience. The mind might be irreparably damaged. So we're protected. We have built-in protection. He's telling me something about Stephen right now.
Good,
Part of what happened with his mind was that he was so highly evolved and so highly sensitive that he pushed at one time harder than he was able, his physical mind was able to handle. So there were like breakdowns in the protective mechanisms. So that too much it came through at once. And he's using that as an example, one type of example. There are other examples in which people become completely psychotic, irreparably insane, when there's more leakage and more less of the protection, and some of the drugs, particularly the variety of psychotropic drugs, are useful for opening, but also very dangerous.
What are the warning signs that may indicate the danger of such an overload, as it were?
Sometimes there'll be a seeming block. For example, if there's someone who has been very open. Well, he said he could use me as an example. That if I am now able to tune in very easily to other planes and other levels of consciousness. And I will sometime be available to both planes at the same time. Very easily able to switch back. He says back and forth. I'm merely at that level now. If I should at some time feel as if I were cut off, as if he says, as if I couldn't reach him, a little bit like I felt right after Stephen died, in a kind of a disoriented place. That is my body warning me to be careful, to rest, to be open, but not to concern myself with pressing to relate to either plane, to simply be like in a state of nothingness, and then it will just go away. But that if at that time I pushed and as I was tempted to do when I think about it a little bit, to just sit in long hours of meditation, I could push over into this area where there wouldn't be no protection. So I guess if we talk about generalizing, it has to do with learning to become more sensitive to one's own instrument. And Hans is saying that this is something I can help other people very much. He's going back again to what we talked about last evening in terms of my working with people who are doing this kind of exploration work.
Yes.
That my own sensitivity to this process can be helpful and encouraging and possibly prevent people pushing through barriers that are there for their protection.
So therefore, when there's an automatic turn-off process, that should not be pushed.
That should be honored.
I see. Very good. So this is sort of a design factor, as it were, where we encounter someone who has difficulty with that. We should let it go naturally, as against pushing.
But there's a difference. Again, it comes to the experience and the sensitivity of knowing which it is, of knowing if it's a resistance set up by the party because of fear, mostly because of fear, but there may be other emotions. So it's a question. It's not an across-the-board thing, he says. It's probing has to be done, individual probing. But he says if this kind of thing is going to be approached and handled in a broad scope, it would be best to follow that generalization that you just stated. It would be best to simply not push when some barrier seems to arise. But he's telling me personally that I can learn to differentiate, that I already know how to differentiate between a self-imposed ego-type barrier and one that is a protective barrier for the mechanism.
Fine, wonderful. Is picking up another small part of, is all mental illness related to this breakdown of barrier? Is that a good generalization?
No. Most psychotic states are related to this barrier, but there are types of mental illness that are self-imposed. Particularly catatonic states that either are, well, they all have a karmic, these particular self-imposed states have a karmic connection. Let me see if I can get more information about that.
Good.
Well, it seems that there are categories of mental illness that, such as psychotic depression or catatonic states, that are a reaction of the individual to his own process, his own assumption or lack of assumption of responsibility. He says it appears over a long term when we look at this sort of thing. It's not just, although it may be in an individual lifetime, it's usually a reaction to something that was put into operation in another lifetime by that entity. It has to do with the cause and effect, so that's where the choice factor comes in. Sometimes we see it as simply making a choice in this lifetime to withdraw from the struggle. And it is a conscious choice, but he's saying that it is rare, if ever, that this choice is made fully in this lifetime. It's like a tendency in that direction has already been established.
Good. What posture should we who try to help take in the case where the barrier is broken or where it is a self-imposed? What do we do in these cases? What stance should we take?
Well, the first thing is to understand, have a human compassion, and to realize that these people are not consciously behaving in this manner, even though that some of the group have some choice. It isn't a conscious, on a conscious level, choice. So we must be compassionate first of all. He says there's really very little that can be done in the sense of actively healing these people. The people where the barriers have been broken through, where there's some leakage, some of them are irreparable. Others, with the proper rest and a complete lack of pressure of any kind, could heal. The mechanism could heal itself. And so it's a matter of adjusting the environment more than doing something. The ones who are irreparably insane simply have to be taken care of. It's just a process that some pain that they have to work through and work out.
How would the schizophrenic fit into this pattern?
Well, most schizophrenics are actually damaged in this lifetime by their environment. Early childhood patterns. But they come in with this is what brings it on, but they have less natural immunity. Okay, let's see how to put that. They have less protection. It's like there's a protective coating of some sort. Now, the words aren't right, but there's a protection around our vital force, our vital energy that comes in. And there seem to be individuals born with less protection than others. And if those particular individuals are treated in a certain way in the human condition, they break down. Another individual could be placed in that same environment and wouldn't break down and become schizophrenic. Drugs play a large role in this. Any kind of drugs cause a breakdown in those individuals who are less protected. So the schizophrenics would fit into the pattern of a leakage. Be a specific type of pattern where the individual moves too far into another state of consciousness and is unable to distinguish between his reality and the consensus reality.
Is it possible for us to in any way help restructure such an individual so that he is re-strengthened in some form?
Hans says that there may be methods that are outgrowths of this kind of method we're using to reach into other consciousness. But that... What's he saying? He said that teaching methods may be devised to help these individuals maintain the ability to distinguish which state of consciousness they're in, but that during the time they're in an acute phase of schizophrenia, that again, it's just a matter of allowing them to heal, that they are so open and so raw that any form of active treatment is unpredictable.
Is it possible then to help them identify this consensus reality properly and the other consciousness which is interfering with this?
Yes, but not during an acute phase.
Not during the acute phase. Could be very interesting. Then to pick up another thing that seemed interesting, in terms of this question of dreams, where does what we label nightmare fit into that? And where does that fit into this whole pattern, this deeply moving nightmare experience?
Well, Hans says that this is an exaggeration of the emotions that are felt in the human body in ordinary consciousness, or they are either felt in ordinary consciousness and exaggerated in the nightmare, or in some cases are blocked, so that when it would be appropriate to be angry, the person isn't angry, and that emotion comes out in the nightmare in some other form. The dream state doesn't always distinguish the separate emotions, like sorting out love and hate and fear and joy and anger, sorrow. When there's just a strong emotion, it has to be released some way. Sometimes it's clear-cut what it's about, and those are the dreams we can analyze and bring to the surface issues that the person, a patient, if it's in somebody in treatment, bring to the surface the underlying problem through the dream. Also, he says there are some nightmares, particularly children's nightmares, that come from a former life, memories, some tragic or frightening memories. and that the physical body reacts in terror because the memory comes through, so that the typical nightmare situation of the person stiffening or screaming or becoming very tense, changing the breathing, sometimes even going into almost a state of tetany, is due to the fear. And of course due to the change breathing pattern as the fear develops.
Very good. Then here was another point. Is it possible, for example, as you are now, for Hans to help you have a forward memory in time? For example, can you have a forward memory of a week from now, which would be March 14th, and have you see what March 14th is in forward memory? Can he help you do this now?
I'll ask him. Well, he says I still have some investment in being correct, and in what does he say? In my part of me that I've dealt with to a great extent, but there's still part of that kind of perfectionist part, and that's interfering. He says he has tried from time to time to put flashes of future memory into my mind, my conscious mind, and sometimes it's been effective and other times it hasn't. But that when I lose that final hanging on to perfectionism, it will be very easy. He says I can lie still for a minute or two and he can try, and so I'll do that.
All right, that'd be very interesting. I'll wait.
Myself in my office wearing something blue, and there are clouds outside, but it's not raining. It's the morning, maybe about 10:30.
What has taken place during the past week, then?
On some kind of a difficulty about the transportation
Focusing on difficulty.
back to California. But it's okay, works out. Something about the reservation. Arriving in a lot of rain. Awakening the next day to sunshine. It seems really specific enough to have any other meaning. I mean, that would be different or out of the ordinary.
What?
Well, he's saying something about this Panama Canal Treaty, and it's not At least by that time it's not ratified. Heavy snow. Heavier snow. Through a lot of the United States. A lot of work stoppage. This again is not very specific. Just has a general feeling of the phrase again was a general feeling of the storm before the calm.
Very good. That's one way to put it.
I sort of had the feeling that later in March things smooth out for a while.
Less snow.
Less snow and less... Somehow when people begin to thaw out, there seems to be less... violence.
Where does the cold strike in, or does it?
So it will be past the 14th before it's settled.
Very good.
But I can see what he says, what he said to me earlier. I'm watching the interference.
I see.
It's like something will flash and then my mind will try to evaluate it, and I have to let go of that. I haven't done that yet.
Ask him if in this future memory we've heard so many things about earth changes in California. Ask him if you can come anywhere near a good picture of that without being a perfectionist.
Because I'm too emotionally involved in it.
That's what I suspected.
It also says that I will clearly be aware just prior to any major changes.
Well, that will certainly be helpful. Do we have any, then we can lean on your awareness for the next, say, 6 months?
Well, he says all I can willing to say is that I'll be aware prior to a major catastrophe.
Very good.
But he says there might be a minor one very soon. Following off the rain.
What does he mean by minor?
An earthquake or a series of earthquakes. But, I mean, nothing's minor, even if one person is killed, but in terms of a catastrophe, it will just be regarded as a warning. I can't seem to get it very clear.
It's true. You're emotionally involved, and he's right.
I get Fresno, something around about Fresno, but I don't get much clarity on it.
Well, fine. Let's then move to something else and let him, if he still is happy and willing to try something else. I asked him about the question of in terms of mind, brain, and the use of various frequencies, whether they be audio or magnetic. Do these have specific effects on the mind or the brain? We are using some now, for example. Are there others that, let's say, are contraindicated and others that are beneficial? Has he any ideas on those?
Well, it says it doesn't affect the mind, it affects the brain. And then that stimulates the mind process. Yes, there would be magnetic forces that could be damaging to the brain. Radioactive forces are damaging to the brain.
Any specific frequencies that might cause damaging resonances, as it were?
Yes, there are, but he's not telling me specifically. There are frequencies that would be absolutely tormenting.
He doesn't know them, or it's just a policy with him? The reason we ask is so that we can avoid them.
Well, he says that, again, like he's done this with me before, I don't quite understand this. It may be something to do with my own instrument, but apparently he doesn't or isn't able to transmit technical information to me that my mind isn't familiar with. And I ask him what difference that makes, and I don't understand that we're talking about it. And he says it has to do with a particular type of channel that this instrument is, that it has to do with a highly developed intellectual center that does block out certain unfamiliar information, and I'm arguing with him about that it isn't sensible, and he says that I at some time can be and probably will be refined to the extent that there won't be those blocks. But to go back in terms of the frequency, the sound frequency, it's a very, very high sound, one that cannot normally be heard at all, that there's no danger of you using it in your work. It's not, it's so far removed from what you're considering, but that there are sounds that are damaging, could cause permanent damage to the brain, could cause a person to become insane and die.
I was glad to know that they're so far away from what we're using or intend to use. Then one other part of it. What is the process that we know of as music, then, for example? How does this relate to an activity of the brain and then the mind?
He's talking about, it's a little hard for me to understand. He's talking about the music being already there. And the music is already there. It exists. And I'm saying, well, but what about somebody gets out his violin and starts playing it and then we hear it? That seems to take place in a linear fashion. But that's our perception. Music, he says, music is an arrangement of sounds that are always available.
But some of them have an emotional effect on humans. And why is this emotional effect created by music?
Well, each tone is connected to a color. It's connected to an emotion. Connected to the centers in the body.
Is there any way that we can determine what tones are connected to what colors and what tones are connected to what parts of the body? Is there any source for this?
Well, he says this has been written up. It's available. In the esoteric literature, there are a number of, I see a book, Harmony, Color and Harmony. I can just read Harmony on the cover. But he's saying that this isn't among unexplored territory, that it's already available to us.
Which is perhaps some reliable source that is accurate.
He's telling me if I want this information to contact a friend. He names the friend who's a musician and involved in music therapy.
You know the friend then?
Yes.
Good. What is related to all of this then? Where does emotion fit into this human body, mind, soul structure? Is emotion a valuable thing, an annoyance, a hindrance, or something to be developed?
Well, emotion is an integral part of the human condition. We have to maintain an equilibrium within the body between the physical and the emotional, the mental and the spiritual. Each is equally important while one is inhabiting a human body. The equilibrium's the big message. The balance is very important. So that while one is in the human body, to fully experience the emotions is essential. As one develops to a higher level of consciousness, the emotions may not appear to be so fully expressed. They may not be obvious to others in the environment, but they must be fully experienced. There is a change in the quality of emotions with developing consciousness. Sometimes it's a negative change. Sometimes people block elements of their emotional body in an attempt to move on to a higher level of consciousness or a higher level of intellectual understanding. And sooner or later, the whole system goes out of balance. One is not any more important than the other. Is there anything else specifically about the emotional system you want to know?
In terms of emotion, is this under what categories? We have our typical categories of what we call emotion. Are those what we're speaking of?
Yes, we're speaking of the sensations actually experienced in the body that are called fear or anger or love or sadness, joy, and all of the minor fear, I think. All of the minor emotions that we know make up the emotional body, but these are only names. It's a sensation of experiencing the level of fully experiencing what is taking place, what is being felt by the body, is the whole area of emotions.
Yes. Then it is, when you say felt by the body, it is is it more of a sensual pattern, a physical?
It's a sensation.
As a physical sensation as such. That reflects into the mental then.
Well, we use the mental to interpret. Everything is interwoven. Mostly when we think in terms of the physical body itself, we think in terms of the involuntary part of the body. Because so much of the voluntary aspect that comes from the mind affects aspects of the body. The emotional system is just as natural as the involuntary physical system of the body. It's a sensation under certain circumstances. A baby feels a sensation of falling and feels fearful. And we've only put that name on it, fear. Feels a sensation, an emotional sensation. The normal anxiety feelings and fear feelings are felt normally in the stomach, but people could feel them in different parts of their body. But it's an actual sensation. And one can learn. As Hans is saying to me, the work I've done in this area has been accurate and useful in training people to become aware of those physical sensations and to identify what the feeling is, and then to realize that one has control over behavior. The feeling is involuntary, but it is not necessary to behave in a certain way as a result of this emotion. So that's what is meant when it's said that at a higher level of development, a higher level of consciousness, the outward expressions of the emotions are not as apparent. For example, I learn by experiencing the sensations in my body when I am becoming very angry. I learn the sensation. And as I'm aware of this sensation, and as my consciousness develops, I'm also aware that I have a choice in how to express this anger or whether to express it, where it's appropriate, and in what way I can use it, so that the emotional system generates energy, and the energy can be used at a high level of efficiency, where it often is not.
Then it does generate energy, then.
Generates energy.
Very good. One other, just to change patterns on a potpourri, because I pick up these as they develop. In individuals entering for the human physical experience, have all of them previously been human, or do they enter from some other area?
No, everyone who is here has not previously been human. There are entities who are not human, who have never been human, and there's a changing pattern. Although it's very small, he says less than 5% would be entities here for the first time.
Why do they come here?
Out of curiosity.
Well, that's a good reason. Where do they enter from? From what is their source?
Well, it's all the same source. We're all part of the universal wholeness, and we're all scattered parts. At the time the one scattered itself to play that game we've talked about and make the humans, also there were parts that entered other forms.
In this planetary system or other ones?
In many other systems.
So is it conceivable that 5% may have come from other systems?
It's possible. He's sort of not very communicative about that for some reason.
All right. Is there any way that we can identify that 5% by any particular characteristics?
Well, not clearly. He says it a general kind of statement that they would be more apt to be inhabiting bodies that are at a low level of mental development, not retarded people, but people who perhaps lived in underdeveloped areas where they're learning mostly survival. It would be like there would be some, suppose we take a very underdeveloped area, there would be many people that had chosen to go through that because, for karmic reasons, difficulty in surviving. Then there are new people who choose to enter a situation where they can learn the basic tools and then later learn more advanced ways of being. But he says no as far as specifically identifying. We can't do that as humans.
Fine, that would be interesting. One final area that would be very appropriate as far as I can see. From Hans's viewpoint, what are the basic universal laws, oneness laws that we should observe or need to observe?
So we reap.
And another?
We all must come to the final common pathway. Surrender.
Of surrender.
There's a pull, almost like a magnetic pulling toward the whole. I feel it, I experience it like I'm being sucked in. And the law is that there is a continual pull toward oneness. That may over the centuries have been described as conscience. And probably in other terms. But it's almost like a magnetic pull to become one. And that nothing we could ever do would negate that pull. It would interfere. Slow it down.
Fine. Any other final one?
Let me see.
All right.
Let's see, something has to do with balance. equilibrium that has to be maintained. Perspective of ordinary human consciousness. It seems as if there's a duality in all things. And from this perspective, they have to balance. Absolutely have to balance. If we separate things into good and evil, there has to be as much evil as good. Because the reality is that there is no duality. And looking from the universal view, everything just is. And it's like you're on one side of a screen and then you jump over to the other side and you've got all these things divided up. He's showing this to me, that's why it's not in very good terminology. So the law is that there has to, an equilibrium has to be maintained. That everything has a flip side. And that for us to truly understand the universal view, we have to know there has to be, in our dual world, there has to be an equal amount of each opposite, because they really blend together to make one.
Thus, joy is nothing without sorrow.
That's right.
Or a mountain is nothing without a valley beside it.
Same thing. Everything in the emotions, in the physical world, and anything that our mind sees as dual has an opposite, and both together they make the whole. And again, there's that pull, just like there's the pull, it's like a magnetic pull of our individual separateness toward the whole. There's the pull of these two opposites toward each other to make the whole.
Would this somehow relate to human male and femalisms?
Yes, but that's only like a reflection.
Yes, a reflection. Well, ask Hans if he has any final word for us, or you, in this particular meeting. And then if he does not, or whatever, then thank him and return to normal 10.
To explain to me and to us that, as he has pointed out today, there are certain limitations in this instrument, meaning myself as a channel, that have to do with situations in which I'm very emotionally involved, and or situations that connect up with my perfectionism. But that I will... Oh, and there's another limitation. Well, it comes through the perfectionism, that it's easier for him to channel information through me in areas where I have some kind of previous knowledge, because those areas, those particular channels are very open. But he also wants to say that not only for me as a channel, but anyone who's doing this work will have certain limitations because of the divine plan, that if we as human beings are given all of the answers to the future, all of the scientific information, everything just clear, we then would not have the struggle that it's necessary to have in order to grow and develop. That it doesn't come, how could I say, the development cannot be just handed to us like we as parents often feel we can save our children the struggles we've been through by telling them. But in order for them to grow, they must, as humans, go through struggles of their own. And he says we know this on a human level, but sometimes we forget it when we move into other planes.
Is not what we are doing now a sort of a part of the divine plan of seeking after truth?
Yes, it is. And he's saying that's why he cooperates and other people, other guides cooperate, because there's much we can do, you and I, on this plane, to help people develop, and we need to find information for ourselves and others. But he's still reminding me that there will always be certain curtains. There may be certain frustrations that we must accept. Accept as well, I'm not meant to know that right now. Because I've asked him, for example, a number of times, separately from here, why wasn't I more warned about Stephen dying when I was so open to everything else that was happening? And he said that it had to be that way for me, that I had to gain strength by moving without that knowledge. And that's an example that may come up over and over. There may be negative experiences in life that must be experienced in a sudden, unexpected way in order for us to perfect our ability to attune ourselves to the divine will and the divine plan. And he wants us to know this. He wants to emphasize it. He's just he's pounding on a table and he's saying, now, don't lose your faith in this process, or your willingness to channel and to work, simply because there is always something hidden. So I guess that's pretty clear.
Yes, I can understand that. One final point.
Mm-hmm.
Is it feasible, and would it be of any benefit for Hans to speak directly through you as a channel? Would this be of any clarification or any reason to do this?
He says sometimes he does. And if it's appropriate, I am the kind of channel that could occur. But sometimes there is more, more strain on the physical instrument. And when that is appropriate, it will happen.
Just a point of information.
Mm-hmm.
This is doing very well. That's fine. And again, tell him that I personally enjoyed it very much and benefited from it very much. And that we will see him again in one of our days or so.
All right.
All right? And then move back to normal 10.